Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, has set another daily record of 830 local infections despite restrictions. For more on that, let's cross live to our correspondent Greg Navarro in Sydney. Greg, what happened exactly? Why hard lockdowns in Australia cannot stop the spread?
Well, I guess in a word, it's the Delta variant as we battle the wind here on a hazy day here in Sydney. This highly infectious variant that authorities are trying to deal with not only here in the greater Sydney area, but also in Victoria and other parts of the country. And the measures that served Australia so well, those restrictions during the majority of the pandemic with the less infectious strains, are clearly not having the same impact, at least in terms of being able to reduce case numbers down to just a handful or zero. In this case here, as you mentioned, in Sydney, another day of record-breaking 24-hour infections recorded over 24 hours, more than 800 today. Same with yesterday as well, and 3 deaths reported. Look, it appears that Australia is now experiencing things that other countries experienced in the majority of the pandemic. We were lucky enough here not to have to deal with that as far as surging case numbers. Now, it's not just what's happening here. Also, Victoria is dealing with an increase in COVID case numbers there as well. There is a sense that this is something that we will have to live with, at least infections out on the community, something that Australia is clearly not used to doing. The question remains just at what level of virus and at what level of vaccination do we need to be in order to be able to move forward. Pandong?
Well, Greg, so having said that, is the Australian government still determined to carry on its hard lockdown policy until, as the Prime Minister put it, 70% of the population is fully vaccinated?
Well, absolutely. In fact, that's the modeling. That's what the government and the Prime Minister announced a month or so ago, as Australia looked to transition from that zero COVID strategy to one where we were able to open the borders here. People are able to not only travel between states, but also people from overseas allowed to come into the country. But all of that, as you mentioned, is predicated on a certain vaccination level. That's 70 or 80% of the total population. Those figures were determined by some modeling done by an independent research institution. The problem, though, is that there are some questions raised as to just how effective that modeling will be in light of the fact that in Sydney we're not dealing with tens of cases a day, we're dealing with hundreds of cases, approaching the 1,000 a day mark. It may not sound like much compared to other countries, but it is hugely significant here, not something that anybody really foresaw or planned for. So as to what type of vaccination rates it'll take in order to be able to live with some form of COVID here is really difficult to tell. You know, one thing that we do know is that there is a growing level of frustration over lockdowns. We certainly saw that here to some extent in Sydney, but in particular in Victoria and Melbourne yesterday, 4,000 people took part in protests, violent protests, ones that the police commissioner there said were the worst he had seen, the most violent in 20 years. A total of at least nine police officers had to be hospitalized as a result of that. And the fines, we're told, once they're finished being handed out to people not only arrested but cited for being there, will total well over $1 million. Pantone?